computer. There it is.
There it is.
Hello, Suzi.
Hey, Maria.
Hi. So I will introduce you to everybody watching this as both my teacher and my mentor, and then dear friend, and just a woman I'm inspired by, to say the least.
That's a nice intro.
Yes. But tell me, how would you introduce yourself and actually say a little bit about the work that you do?
So it's a fluid introduction, right? Because you asked me at different points of my life and different things are important to me, right? So I'll give kind of a classic introduction because then I get to introduce Bert Hellinger. And I met Bert Hellinger, who is the curator or assembler or pioneer of this particular understanding of family constellations. And I met him as a publisher, which is really fun because I met him through my head. And actually, our relationship was quite intellectual on a certain level and deeply emotional on another level, because of course life happens in the interim. So I started out as a publisher, as an editor, enabling other voices. And at a certain point, I became very resentful of the work that I did. Though I loved the people I worked with and I loved being able to facilitate those voices, there was something in me that really got like, oh, I am squelching my own voice. I'm squelching my own voice. And it took me a couple of decades. I had a pretty good threshold for that. couple of decades to say, this is not good because you're becoming sort of angry. And I don't see myself as angry. And I met Bert Hellinger and I was ready to meet him, evidently. And I began to organize for him. And then I began to teach that work. And then I began to have an outlet for my own voice. And then I began to take risks to say, people hear, they don't hear. My existence isn't contingent upon other people's validations. I will do my best. Always, I will try to do my best. But I don't have to do the spaces that meet me. Huge paradigm shift in my life. So I am a facilitator. And I am, used the word before, and I love the word, I'm a teacher. And the core of the work that I do is family constellation. But if anybody truly does family constellation, they bring everything to the table. And as soon as you bring everything to the table, you quickly no longer have one school of thought. And so I would say that I bring writing, literature. My teachers include Bert Hellinger, but not only Bert Hellinger. And I'm, at this point, I use my voice a lot. Right now, I'm using my voice a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a presenter. And I have so many people out there in the world who have taken something from me. I have been a team member for them. I've been a team member for you.
Yes.
And it is the most exciting, extraordinary thing for me to see people go out into the world and use their voices. So I am still an editor in a certain way. I am still facilitating in a certain way, but not to the exclusion of myself.
That's really beautiful. You said so many golden things. And one of the things I appreciate the most about you and your teaching is that you can allow yourself not to be linear, not to be guided by rigid structures, but to really dance with what's coming up in a space, dance with what people are dealing with, and bring everything to the table, while also allowing everybody that you teach to bring everything to the table. And that's just such a great quality, I find, that not many teachers possess. And, sometimes in certain disciplines, who am I to say that that's not maybe what's called for? Maybe you need that kind of rigidity, but definitely family constellations and your intention to elevate people's voices is getting fulfilled in this very floating, gentle, but very effective way.
That's beautiful to
Mm.
hear back. It's beautiful to hear back.
Yeah, that's really my biggest appreciation of you as a teacher. And you mentioned Bert Hellinger, who actually created family constellations, and like I see him as a father of family constellation work. So just for everybody who is watching who hasn't had an experience of what this is, I know people hear the word constellation and it can be misleading.
Look up to the stars.
They think it's astrology or and alike. And even when we say the word family, it doesn't seem like we're talking about the dynamic in relationships between people. So what's the way you would describe the family constellations in a broader way, so that we can kind of give it, as much justice as we can?
Yeah, no, right. And it's a little bit like, in this conversation we have, however many minutes we have. So it's a little bit like talking about, painting or dance, so that I can give some highlights, some markers. But of course, because it is a way in the world, that way in the world unfolds over experiences and years and so forth. So, but I'll start kind of maybe from the center of it. It is and by the way, let me come back to the father piece when you make me remember.
I will make a note.
Make me remember. That on some level, on the most pedestrian level, it's a broadly systemic view of an individual. So sometimes people use the phrase actually systemic constellations. For me, the only problem with that, of course, is that it sounds rather cold, sounds a little bit clinical. People tend to think of organizations. It is about organizations, but on a very human level. So we come from a system, we carry a system, and then we meet the world through the content of the system. So constellations attend to the places where options became narrower and where options can again become wider. When you think about a constellation, you think about the way stars create patterns, or we see them in patterns, how energies cluster around events in the universal system, events in the personal system, and events in the family system. So what may be dynamics between me and my father and me and my mother, where things got shut down or amplified to such a degree that I feel I am still in their sway, right? As soon as I can open the door to the larger system and understand where those difficult vocabularies began to take shape, I began to open the door in my system, not only toward the past, but towards a different, permitted, for me a huge word is permission, future. And permission because in our interior space, we actually know most of the answers. I know I should stop drinking. I know I need to get out of this job. I know I should marry this man. I know I should unmarry this man. I know I should not yell at my children. I know. And then this other thing kicks in that says, I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
So the first thing when I sit with a client that I know pretty much 100% of the time is that I am going to navigate their ambivalence. And the ambivalence is the fight, in a way, between the force of the past and what I like to call the undertow of the past and the promise of the future. So constellation is both a process, an evocative experiential process that is not about me delivering information to you, but you and I entering into a collaboration in which all of that information is evoked. And then you use the word dance. We do a little dance to come to the authentic choice points for you,
Yeah.
right? So the process is collaborative, experiential, filled with compassion, different than sympathy, even a little different than care, right? Compassion because we are both humans, and because I have no information to give you to make you a better person. We are
Yeah.
entering a path. We are opening a path. And it's a philosophy. And so for me, you know, part of my role here, it is, I come from the world of books, right? And I met Hellinger in the world of books. For me, the philosophy stands without the process, but the process cannot hold without the philosophy.
Mm.
And right?
I
Because
love
other,
it.
the
Let me
philosophy can
hear that again.
stand, yeah, the philosophy can go on without the process
Mm-hmm.
because the process is internal on some level,
Yes.
right? But the process is untethered without the philosophy.
Yeah.
And it may feel magical to people, which is lovely,
Yeah.
but for me, the democracy of it, the fact that I could work with you, Maria, and then I could go out that door and I could get much more, right? That's the democratic piece. And that is the lens or the philosophical piece, right? And, you know, constellations, Bert was observing until he closed his eyes for the last time, right? Because the philosophical piece or the lens is this ever burgeoning piece that's based on observation, not based so much on theory.
Yeah.
Right? So we're working systemically and we're looking for the places where life force got blocked or circumvented. And then we're looking for the places and the permission for options to open up again,
Yeah.
right? Because when we look at our families, it's kind of like the ancestry is like this, and then it gets very narrow in our family. And we don't want to continue in the narrow, we want to continue in the wide.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really beautiful, beautifully said. And I think, you know, as a coach for many years, one of the things that I uncover with people is this, like, such a sharp look at their parents, mom and dad. Oh, if only they were different. You know, I relate to that myself, but only if they were different. And what constellation allows for, and I know this is what brought me to it, is to look beyond mom and dad, to look at them as gatekeepers and access gifts that go beyond just the two people that you know did the best they could for the most part. And you know, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, right? Like there are probably some exceptions to that, but as a parent myself, like I definitely know I'm not a perfect parent. So to be looked at, oh, I could have done something different. No, I am doing the best I can with the resources I have right now. So what I love about, and especially the way you do constellations, because, you know, the work is out there, and I think people do bring themselves to it. So
Sure.
the extent to which people can hold the,
Ambiguity and
exactly,
nuance.
exactly, is the extent to which I think it actually it has power. So, you know, what I've encountered in many different works and in my experience is often this feeling that we have to niche what we do, that it has to be very
Mm,
precise, you know, just to not talk metaphorically, but to even use my example of, I've always created art. And then, you know, I went to pre-med thinking I'll become a doctor, and then realized I was not going to bartend to pay medical school. So I switched to studying film, but it was always this like either or. I can do this
mm-hmm,
or I can do that. And the
mm-hmm,
experience of, oh, pre-medical school, I'd be honoring my grandfather and also my mother, and actually grandfather on father's side. What was interesting to me about coming to constellation work is that I could see all these seemingly separate pieces of myself and be anchored in
Yeah.
something that is bigger than that.
Yeah.
So can you say more about that? Because, and then if you want to tie it in with father, that you mentioned about
Thank you for
in that conversation.
No, I don't want to talk about that. No, I'm kidding. Right. I think that we are taught and we teach ourselves in terms of feeling flooded or confused in our nervous systems, but that's nested in our parents being flooded and confused in their nervous systems. And by the way, the complaint about our parents, it's amusing in a way for me to think like, oh, my mother had the same complaint about her mother, right? And we're so used to looking at deficit and then feeling our content as either being in line with that deficit or rebelling against that deficit.
Yeah.
Both of those images are very narrow images, right? So what if my identity begins to be inclusive of that deficit, but also being able to go on beyond those parameters, so that deficit begins to have different meaning in me. It's not a deficit in me. And I look at my mom and I think, yeah, there's certain things about you that drove me crazy and maybe even hurt me that exist in me. But as I move into a larger field, actually have a different impact, a different texture and feeling to them, right? So I think I've forgotten the question. What was the question?
It's okay. You know.
No, the different parts.
Yes.
So we learn from our parents, and we learn in school, and we learn in many different places to compartmentalize. And for me, this compartmentalization is very poignant, I guess is the word, actually. Sometimes it's actually destructive, but it's very poignant. There's a certain level of sadness when I think about it. And even hearing like people saying, constellations, so much better than psychotherapy or whatever. I think, no, it doesn't have to be. Constellations with psychotherapy, constellations with your AA meetings, constellations with your love of painting, constellations not separate. That compartmentalization that we do out there, we do in here.
Yeah.
Right? All of that wrong now, making a new choice, this choice is going to be right.
Yeah.
Well, nope. Not true, right? If I'm running away from this and finding this, really, this second thing doesn't have a chance. So that is in relationships, it's in parts of self, it's in childhood, it's in all of that. The gatekeeper image, which I also hold, is that our parents are individuals and our parents are gateways to the content of us.
Yeah.
Some of which we know, and some of which we get to know along the way, if we're lucky, right? And it's only kind of that big flow that actually begins to provide permission for the big flow moving forward. If I am loyal only to these two beautiful folks behind me, loyal or rebellious, then that sets the same compass moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? So at this point in my life, I wanted it at every point in my life, but I really didn't have an idea how to do it. I want my compass to be set toward more, not same, not redundancy and not opposition.
Yeah.
But both and, not but, right?
Yeah.
Both and.
Yeah.
So that beginning to kind of feel into the system behind us in a more holistic way allows us to agree to the system within us. And as soon as we agree, that's the fertile ground for change. Disagreeing with my bad self, my addicted self, my angry self, my weak self, my disagreeing with all of that keeps me right there in that argument.
Yeah.
It is the agreement that allows things to change.
Yeah.
So agreement way back there, flowing through to agreement here.
Yeah.
Flowing through to agreement there.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And, you know, as you know, like I wanted to create this video for the community that I built around clean slate to create theme, which is really the theme of, you know, you have to create space so that you can create something. And I think constellation brings this new dimension to it, because cleaning something doesn't mean excluding it. Like, and
Right.
if we even like look at it physically, right? Like if, say somebody is disorganized and has a lot of clutter at home, well, the answer is not to just get rid of things, because in a process, you will get rid of things that you need. So it's more about looking at what you have and then seeing how it serves you, and then having it empower you one way or the other, organizing it, you know, in a way that can serve the future that you're creating. And I see constellation in many ways as a way to create that clearing space, but it doesn't mean you destroy something. It actually means you take it in, you integrate it. You're not resisting it. You're in agreement with that, which also in a sense, the situation of pandemic,
Yes.
you know, if,
yes.
you know, I don't know. I don't actually know personally anyone that is still upset that there is a pandemic, but it just is. And I think,
Yeah.
look, you know, for me, one of the first books I read by Hellinger, and I want to let you speak about him. I will say whatever you wanted to say about father that I mentioned before, but one of the first books I read is Acknowledging What Is. And
That's a great book. Yeah.
yeah. And I think actually if that was the only thing I got, it was golden, right? Because it really, like, not fighting against something that already is, like it is. So anything you wanted to say, I want to make sure I give you space and room to say about what I said about father, and if there's anything else you wanted to mention about Hellinger or even your work, because I want to guide you into the work that you do, that is also magnificent and
Thank you.
really, really talks about this principle of, you know, your last workshop. That's what I'm aiming at, and I'll let you speak about it. But that last workshop that you did really spoke to me. Like, how we leave things is how we arrive to new things. So if you can just tie it all, I'll let you just, I'll listen. I'll listen, team.
Well, I'll try not to wander off too far.
Yeah.
So something you said, the phrase that I have for that, for what you were describing in terms of the clean slate, is that and integration. So I use this word integration too, because integration is where relief is. We're terrified of it, and it's actually where relief is. And it speaks to us in the voices that we have that are speaking to us all the time. Integration, when we are able to integrate small, big, we are saying to ourselves, I have capacity.
Mm-hmm.
What a beautiful sentence. I have capacity to take responsibility. I have capacity to look. I have capacity. And that moves into a different reciprocity with the world. So the phrase that I use there is that we can't release what we don't claim, right? So that idea to take in, to even sort, or to release in a good way, we have to take it in first. We have to take it in first, right? What I wanted to say about, just quickly, I think, about Hellinger, and you referred to him as the father, is that in his work, and in many works, truthfully, we think about the idea of mom gives life. Well, that's the most powerful thing that can possibly happen, right? I can't have all my gratitude, and I can't have all my complaints if I didn't get life first, right? Father, he talked about it being very important to imagine what it's like to cultivate the idea that father shows the way. So mom gives the way, gives life, and father shows the way. So I think there is a way in which his development of this work really is kind of showing the way. And I always say that, when I met him, he was the last in a long line, you've heard this line, of father figures for me. I was always searching for my dad, right? He left when I was an infant. You better believe that that was a visceral, primal, not terribly mindful. And I got into a lot of, circumstances that were very hard to get out of. And when I met Bert, best father figure. And what did he do? He turned me to my own father.
Mm.
Right? And that experience of claiming my father,
Yeah.
right, shifted how I go into the world, right? And I use the word assembler or curator because people who are in the world of change, I guess I would say, who are interested in change, will see all of their favorite work in constellations. Hypnotherapy, NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy, spirituality, right? Everything that you are interested in is right there. And if it's not, you're going to bring it.
Yeah.
If it's not there, you're going to bring it. So that idea of his business, his life's work was showing the
Yeah,
way,
definitely.
which is holding up a light, not telling us the steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that that's why it's sometimes difficult to, for me anyway, to define the work as one thing. And I even listening to you, like I, like I want to re-listen to our conversation because you are giving the principles and sharing, but in a very loose concept. Because when you look at a particular situation, particular family system, you bring curiosity to it rather than
Right.
like this is how it is. And
Right.
I think it's so simple in a world today, especially in businesses. We're driven, marketing is driven to define, oh, you do this, you get this. And there's that, like, there's this model of show people their pain and then show them the paradise, and then
Right.
and
Right.
tell them once you pay this you'll get there. And it's this work is so different, and especially the way you do it is so different, and I really appreciate that. Which brings me to, I would love if you can spend a few minutes just sharing some of the work that you actually have, like out there, right? Meaning that it's scheduled, there are workshops happening. And I know for myself, like I try to attend to as many as I can, even though I'm also facilitating myself. But I love the themes that you recently put out. So can you just share how you even came up with the titles? Is that your writing talent and editorial talent? And just
I used to,
tell us about a little bit about how people can actually work with you and explore, not just for themselves. Like I facilitate Constellation, meaning people will come to me with questions, but you actually teach people about this world through your workshops.
So I think that first of all, to be a facilitator of family constellations is a lifelong certification, right?
Mhm.
And maybe the last bit of it is my epitaph. And so to be constantly learning is the stance, is the position. You listen to learn, and each client you work with has something. Yes, maybe you have something to offer, but actually they have something to offer as well. And
Yeah.
it's collaborative from the beginning to the false close, meaning that it closes in that moment, the collaboration closes, but actually the collaboration keeps going, right?
Continuous.
So what I'm working with now are themes that I used to say in publishing, my favorite thing was titling the books, right? Because it's like poetry, right? It's like haiku. Like, what's the title that one can come up with that both reflects kind of the thematic idea, but points to something bigger, right?
Mhm.
What's the evocation versus information? So the last one, the last presentation, and I'm calling them presentations because
Mhm.
they're teaching heavy, they're interactive when they need to be. And for me, constellation means not just one thing, right? There are times when you and I will be in conversation that feels to me big like a constellation,
Mhm.
right? It's
Yes.
requesting more of me than my specificity and my Mother is coming forward, and I see your Eastern European ancestors, and what we're doing is really toward the more of the future. And there are
Yeah.
other times when conversation is just conversation, and that has its own beauty to it. So the last one that I did was called The Good Farewell. And again, going toward the clean slate idea.
Yeah.
For me, most of constellation work, maybe really all of it, is looking at places where things were not allowed to be complete. And if they're not allowed to be complete, either by us or by others, then it means we bring the residue of the past into the future.
Mm.
And residue is different than information. Residue drags on us. It's not necessarily wisdom. It's not necessarily useful. It's not even necessarily relevant. It's like a haunting of something that has not been completed.
Mm-hmm.
And so each completion, and sometimes it can be very heavy completions, the loss of somebody important, or it can be completions that are more in the professional realm where we were humiliated by a boss and it still lives inside of us because it's nested in a message that we heard long ago, and so it has this terrible resonance. If we don't get to complete that, it's difficult to go forward. Maybe it's impossible to go forward with the freshness we need to actually see what's new out there.
Yeah.
And we get into designs when we look at our life where it looks like we're replicating. And so, you know, I always think volition is very important, like to get in connection with our agency, with our volition, to believe we actually have it. So for instance, when I hear people tell me, well, why do I always attract this? Or why do I always attract that? I think to myself, you don't. You choose it. You choose it. And you choose it because
It's a
so
powerful
much,
reframe.
and because, thank you, and because so much residue is coming with you. It's like going into a hot summer day with a very dirty coat, dirty, heavy wool coat, right? You don't get to feel the sun, and you feel like there's something wrong with you. So that idea of like letting the coat drop, it's there, but letting it drop so that we can be fresh. So good completions, tiny ones and big ones, are the open doors for the future, not for redundancy or replication, because every day we replicate something, repeat something, we tell ourselves, see, it's always like this.
Yeah.
And it's such a terribly sad sentence.
Yeah.
So the good farewell is really about completions around multiple levels. And all of the themes in these workshops are things that have come up in collaboration. So they're everything from, so optimism is the next one. And what I consider the fierce courage of optimism. I'm not talking about Hallmark cards. I'm talking about the courage of optimism. I always say that I'm I'm this, like, I haven't cursed once, by the way. I'm the
Good job.
cursing constellator. I'm often quite cynical about things. But when I look at myself, I think, wow, I am fiercely optimistic, right? And I see that probably as my superpower. No sugar involved here, right? It's like a stance. It's a stance, and it comes from, I think, in some ways, like my Hungarian Jewish dad, right? He made some awkward decisions, but man, that family kept going, and had they not, I would not be talking to you.
Yeah.
So I pick up that particular thread. So that's the next one. I'm doing one on abortion. And the theme of that is mother and child. And the idea there begins to be the mother is not erased in abortion. She is still mother to that child. What? All parts of self.
Yeah. Yeah. Really integrating, looking at what is and integrating it. That's beautiful. I'm gonna sign up for the January one about parenting as
About
well.
parenting.
Me and my
Yeah.
husband try to alter like who can take which.
I love that. And doing parenting in couples and the whole thing is called an uncommon lens on the common ground.
Mm,
And I think Hellinger's, that's really what it was. It was an uncommonly wide lens. I use the phrase radical integration for his work. And that idea of radical integration, like we get it in the kind of spiritual realms when we look up or we look back. We're not so good at it when we look at our own grounding.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. I will include your website and information on your workshops so that whomever is listening to this and wants to have an experience of your presentation or workshops, or I know you work also collaborate with Omega and you have different collaborations, so people can sign up and get your newsletter and be aware of what's available so they can take it as it's working for them.
Thank you.
So this is where I would end it. It's been such a pleasure listening to you speak on this subject, and thank you for taking the time and energy and just bringing yourself. And this is what I absolutely love about you and your teaching and just who you are in general, that you just, you always create a bigger space, and in talking to you, like I always feel richer. So thank you so much.
It's so nice to meet you there. And I'm honored by your invitation, and I will take this conversation into the day in a good way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.